listening to the Pursuing Alpha podcast, hosted by Charles Brandon Snyder.
Wes, man, I'm glad to have you on.
Brandon, great to be here, man. Love being in your fancy studio that you have.
We're trying, man. And this thing will not shut up, so I'm going to have to figure out another way to do it. But one of our CFAs
I thought that was
blowing
just
me up.
Every time you have a good idea, you have a chime that goes off in the background. You know.
They would never chime, Wes. There it is. So, this was impromptu because you just flew in just unexpectedly over the last 24 hours. So I'm excited to have you here. So take 10 seconds. We've known each other for a better part of 10 years now, I think it is. So introduce yourself. And so hold on. I got to premise this. So Wes is like one of the top advisors in the country. And don't do the humble thing, but he was my mentor. I've been trying to get him on for a long time, but this was just kind of off the cuff deal. So, but introduce, you have a firm in Texas.
Yeah. No, we've been in the business for now about 20 years, going on 21, and it's great. We're in Austin. I'm in Austin, I should say. We have a completely remote organization, and have way before COVID. So 10 years ago, we were operating remotely. We have clients and team members all across the country. So from one coast almost to the other coast. I think we're hiring somebody soon in California. So.
That's good luck on that one.
Well, they moved from Texas, so it's
So they're good. They're acceptable, right?
That's
so
right.
We have a little reverb. Like somebody's deciding to mow. The one time we do our podcast through the day. This one we do it at night after a couple of whiskeys. So
see, in my podcast, I make the sound quality rough enough to where you don't even hear the guy mowing outside.
That's good. So tell me a little bit about your practice. What do you do?
Yeah, so we are not to use an overused word, but we're integrated because we're trying to replace the word holistic. We're an integrated financial planning company. We work primarily with people that own businesses. That's the majority of the folks that we spend time with. Some highly compensated corporate executives, and we always tell them when we meet our clients, most of them have already done quite a bit of good planning already. Most of them have good advisors that are a part of their team. The other side of things, that minority, they've been really successful. They just haven't done a lot in those areas. So there is that spectrum. But the one thing all of them have in common, and this is really one of the fundamentals from why we created our practice and why we do what we do, is all of them have far more things they're trying to get accomplished than they have time to get to everything. And their effort to get to as much as they can, there's always stuff left undone. And sometimes it's stuff they're aware of. It's been on the list for a while. It just keeps getting kicked down the road. But quite often, Brandon, this is what is most fun for us. It's stuff they're not aware of, that if they were, they'd absolutely want to pursue it because it would so increase their profitability and their quality of life. And that's where we come in. We start at the front end by asking a ton of questions about where they're at from a financial standpoint, about the kinds of things they care about in the future that they're wanting to move towards and create, what a rich life really looks like for them. And then we can have some great dialogue around the areas of planning we specialize in that may be most useful for what they're trying to accomplish. So we charge financial planning fees for 100% of our clients on annual retainer. And then as a result of the planning and execution, we end up managing quite a bit of money and put in place, insurance and help them get wills and do a lot of tax coordination with their CPA to maximize all the money that's going into their pockets.
So when you say holistic, I know you've changed that up, but we use that term pretty much. And to preface this, I've gone through, I think I was your guinea pig. If not, I was your second guy.
We did try a lot of stuff out on you just to see if it would work in the early days.
And if it works on me.
And when he would come back and go, man, it worked. Really? Wow.
Yeah, so it's good. So we've been together for, better part of 10 years inside of there. But I would say just in what you distilled down into the way that you do planning is the bedrock of the way we do planning as well. But your practice goes a little bit different than what mine does. I think your practice is more holistic inside of there, and you have deeper conversations or deep conversations with your clients.
Yep.
And that is what I've gleaned from you over the years of doing this with you. And mine's more of the analytical. You make fun of me for being as analytical.
I love it.
Is
I
what
make fun.
I am.
I just poke out what it is.
I think that what was it, the first or second meeting we had together, it was like you said, hey, Brennan, we talk about the bat phone, but the problem is you don't want to actually use the bat phone.
Yeah, you took that on. So for those who aren't familiar with this, I always said, hey, look, you want to have structured meetings with your clients. We're big Patrick Lencioni fans, and he wrote Death by Meeting, and how the right kind of meetings can actually cause your team to almost be like a beautiful band playing in harmonious time together. The wrong kind of meetings and calendar can cause it to sound more like noise. And I said, the one thing we do is every day we have this check-in meeting, so that we get all the questions I have the day before. I just put them in that little meeting, and I know I'm going to get that question answered tomorrow morning, because there's very few things that, when you're well planned, can't wait till the next morning at that structured time. And I said, and we do have this thing, if you just need to call because it's so important and it's right now, it's called the bat phone. Like, it's an emergency. Hey, and when Brandon, you learned that term, you took it. I don't think you heard anything else about the other meetings. It was all about, the bat phone. Great. It's time to use that. No, actually, it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing. We don't want to use the bat phone all the time.
Right. But I do. And to my defense, I use the bat phone because I like to learn so much. And so it's easier for me to just pick up the phone, learn something from Wes, and walk away from it.
Yeah.
So, after 10 years, though, I think we've grown a little bit.
You fixed it. Yeah, you fixed it.
Yeah. We've run a pretty good practice up to this point, I think. But how would you define the way that you work with clients as far, and this is where me and you just had a great lunch, and we talked about 2 or 3 things, right? First is we talked about how clients operate and how they move.
Yep.
Right. And then we talked about our own practices and how we can improve upon our own practices pretty deeply. And I caught something that I was like, that is something that I need to do. And then there was the technical side of how a practice operates. And when I say practice, like in our world, we're a firm. It's a practice that we participate in. But in a lot of people, they see it as just a business. But I think there's common denominators in all of these things that people can walk away from.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I think about it a lot in terms of, I love the idea of comparing it to making beautiful music, or are you really creating noise every week? And so when I back into what we're doing organizationally, we're very process driven. We're very calendar driven with all of our clients. Is anytime something begins to cause a tension about, like, if I'm worried about something falling through the cracks, or if I have a team member that when we communicate ideas and I'm worried about, I better write this down to follow up with them if they're going to do it. There's things that will be alarm bells for me. And one of those things organizationally that you and I were talking about at lunch was just the ongoing rhythm client communication. And so one of the things we've developed, because I was feeling too much of the negative tension around, I don't really know that I know exactly where this is at. And I don't know that I understand exactly where this family's at or what's falling through the cracks. It wasn't that things weren't working. It was just I wasn't clear on it. And so what we instituted is a couple things. One, we operate off of a two meeting a year calendar. Mm-hmm. So mid-years and year-ends. Mid-years is going to be that deeper check-in where we've updated all numbers. We look at where were you last year relative to where you're at now. What are all the things that we've been working on and accomplished, and what are the things that are outstanding that we need to focus in on? And then in general, it's like, hey, what's changed in your life from like the way you see the world? What's a rich life look like for you now as you talk about going through a year in the life of you, not just when you're retired? And right. I think that's a big part of our industry, and we could certainly go down that rabbit hole if we wanted to, is they often focus so much about when you get to this place all these years from now, and that's a part of our job. We want to make work optional for people, and we want to keep it that way once it already is. But they should also enjoy the process of getting there. And I think oftentimes, organizationally and financially, what ends up happening is our industry is so focused on getting to the end. Well, there's a whole lot of life before that milestone. Sure. And there'll be a whole lot of life after it. So really getting into the side of the client, it's like, what's great look like though? Let's actually back into that. So that meeting is more focused around things like that. And then year end is like we're entering into them now because everybody's filing or has filed their tax return. And we can really turn to all right, before the sun goes down on December 31st, in light of the year you've had, this particular year, what are the things we should be talking about? And are there tax ideas that we need to coordinate with your CPA? Are there things, because the issue is, and you've seen this being in the business as long as you have, how tragic sometimes you're having a meeting with a new client and you see the things they could have done if it was last month that would have saved them $100,000 or more. And even if it's $10,000, I'd rather them have it, right, than the IRS. So
Sure.
it gets to the point where where what we want to do is make sure we never miss that opportunity. So we have the year-end, mid-year, and year-end. Now, the thing we were talking about at lunch, and this is really so subtle and so small, but a big deal, is the strategy summary. It's a one-pager. And what that does is it just distills down what's in progress, what's upcoming, and what's on hold. Because for every client, there are always those things. And again, I'm not going to get exhaustive with it, so it's going to be more of a flashcard. But when's our next meeting? Are you in underwriting? Are we moving money over? Are we tax loss harvesting? What is it? Who's responsible? And because a big part, we have in all of our meetings a lead advisor and a project manager. Most of our project managers are also lead advisors. And so they view the world that way. Now, they're responsible for kind of being the GC of the house. Like the house is getting built, but somebody's got to make sure everybody's showing up on time. If somebody starts not showing up on time, how do we know? Well, we know because we have a one-page strategy summary that once a month, first they all get sent to me if I'm the lead advisor, and I can go, okay, well, actually, let's think about this one bullet different. Or maybe I had a conversation with the client. What it does for me, though, is helps me not ever wake up in the middle of the night and go, where are we at with the Smith family? And what maybe isn't getting done? And is it my fault? Because those are the things that bother me deeply. So
I'm right there with you. That's the thing. I lose money off of two things. And one is did you let something in your team, in the operations, everything, because it's not like we're infallible, right? Yeah. And so everybody thinks that just because you're a planner, you're doing everything perfect all the time.
Right.
And it's 97% perfect. I would say we work really hard to make sure everything's done. And so it's always that double checking everything is where clients, I don't think they even check sometimes. And it's like the fact that you double checked on it is true value.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's a rhythmic dance that we can create. That's a good dance. And so that was a big part of why we do it. Now, here's the other side benefits this has is one, every month proactively, one of our project managers is going, is there anything else here that needs to be done? And that's if they aren't following up in between, at least that one time it's going to show back up and go, probably need to push on this. They know it's going to me as the lead advisor. And usually we have really good project manager lead advisor. So usually I don't have to add a lot to the strategy summary or even move it around. But occasionally I can, again, at this point, I'm using creative energy, not administrative energy, to be able to take
Explain
a look.
what that is.
Yeah. So, I mean, I always use the analogy, probably the best place
hold on. I think a lot of business owners do not understand the difference of this.
Yeah.
I've been in a lot of meetings with business owners, and still in our culture today is still micromanagement.
Yeah.
And I think what you're distilling right now is the difference between micromanagement and proper management.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think about this, like the one analogy I'll use is on our Monday prep meetings, we have what I would consider, we call it a narratives checklist. And it's basically a bunch of bullet points that are meaningful to us about what certain strategies are, what would apply. But it's almost the equivalent if you watch, we're in the middle of football season, it's kicked off NFL, college, and every single one of those coaches has this giant laminated thing on the sideline with all these things that mean a lot to that coach and that team. Now, maybe not as much to people who don't know how to read the code, right?
Right.
But it's like instant triggering of this play. When we're preparing for clients, like a lot of times you're running the same plays because they're just applicable universally. But when we're prepping, it's really nice to pull up that sheet and use my creative energy to look. I would put it this analogy: it's almost like pulling up a whole, what do they call it? A thing of paint. You got all these different, the
little handle that has all the paint on it.
Yeah, has all the paint already there. So rather than me having a blank plate with no paint on it, I've already pre-outlined and categorized and thought through, these are all the possible colors that we have. So whenever I'm looking at that client's plan and the planning we're going to do and the dance we're going to do together, I can then look over at that palette and say, I want those paint and this paint and this paint. So I'm using creative energy, whereas administrative energy would be trying to remember all the colors of the paint and then going and finding them, or trying to remember. I mean, let's face it, one of my favorite quotes in the world, Ben Feldman, back in the day, used to say we come into this business in a state of starry-eyed enthusiasm, and then we educate ourselves to a place of sophisticated confusion. And how true is that, right? We get really smart. We know hundreds of thousands of combinations of ways to accomplish things and do things. And so how do we keep to the side of mature simplicity? Well, you do that with systems that allow you to lean more into the creative energy, where you're simply taking an aggregation of information and picking the 3 that are relevant, then going, what are all the things that are relevant? Because 2 things will occur if you're operating that way. One, you're going to miss stuff, especially on that 3rd or 4th or 5th client that you're preparing for that day, that, everybody's got more meetings to move on to. Everybody's got more things they want to do. To then try and use your brain power for recall
rate, is
like, why would we do that if we can just create something that's right here that says, oh, no, here's all the things, and then update that, add to that, create on that, but use it as a deal. So it's just these little things that help the dance be more attractive, the music sound better, if you will, when we're talking through these kind of ideas and administrative running.
And we've adopted a lot of this. And I would say I've been fortunate in my career, and I think there's a destiny, and the good Lord takes and moves you in a direction that he can utilize you just as much as you see value, and you be able to move your own family in your own ways, right? And the thing that I always say to people is I've been fortunate. I've worked with 4 or 5 planners across the country, and I've taken little things away from each one of these guys. And you're a huge piece of that. I would say 50% of because you've done the Transform series, which is amazing. If you're an advisor, look at the Transform series. You have to be an advisor to be in the Transform series. But it's one of those things, how you grow your practice organically and you grow your practice with purpose, I think is really where it is, and how you communicate to consumers and clients. But the point I'm trying to make here is, if you end up moving in a form that is not thought out, then that confusion sets in. And my tendency is because I'm fortunate to hire and be around and cultivate very technical analysis into everything we can do. And we're in the industry where that can be dangerous.
Sure.
Right? Because it's easy for somebody to, and I always say the smartest advisors, the best advisors in the industry, can distill it down to the simplest terms. And that, you hit it on the head when you're like, hey, it becomes complicated confusion over very simplistic planning, right? So everybody doesn't need to know how the cake's made. Yeah. They just need to know the cake tastes pretty good.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it's one of those things where I always struggle, and this is a good struggle for me, because the struggle's twofold. One is for me is, how do I take my analytical comprehension of, I love the way the markets move, and I love, because it puts me into this space of, I know where the canvas is and I know where the paint is, and it allows me to get very, very granular on complex products. I struggle at times on thinking consumers can take that information in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally...
And this is where I think you're a mastermind on being able to communicate the language side to a complex issue and distill it down into and you're good at finding other mentors, and you become a great mentor to me, to finding other mentors for yourself to actually say, hey, this is great, I'm going to adopt this. And I still use your term to the day, normalizing the new. Take something new, make it normal, and create it inside of there. So it's a rhythm, it's a dance, it's constant engagement of that.
Yeah, our win organizationally is to inspire clients to increase their profitability and quality of life. And there's a number of ways that we get to do that within our deal. One way, though, that we've really tried to just work super hard to keep this is to try and stay in that side of mature simplicity. And because it's kind of like you can have a buffet of all kinds of wonderful food. We understand something, though, with every client and with ourselves is, one, they can only eat so much. And some of them are lactose intolerant, right? So there are certain things that I'm just never going to feed them, because otherwise, I mean, it's not helpful. It may be true, and it may be useful for me, but the really gold mine in our business, I think, is to then determine, but what do I actually serve to these folks that they can actually use that's going to help them increase their profitability, their quality of life, make better decisions, live with fewer regrets. Those are the things. and it is a bit of translation, and you know, because I mean that's the funniest thing. I always used to joke, but like the worst meetings in the world when you're new in the business before you have a process or an approach really, and do you ever get that guy that sits across from you and it's like, what do you got for me today? Give me your best 3 ideas, you know, stuff that, and I would say, listen, there's hundreds of strategies, hundreds of thousands of combinations of them. Which one is most relevant is completely dependent on where you uniquely are and the future that you're trying to create. Because you can be the same person with the same set of same balance sheet as somebody else, but where you want to go, the future you want to dance with is very different than what this person does. And so we need to know that, because then I can distill the world of, you know, hundreds of thousands down to 6 that are going to be the most relevant. And then we continually realign. I love Carl Richards' definition of meaningful financial planning. He calls it real financial planning. I like the word meaningful with it. Is meaningful financial planning is all about the alignment of the use of capital or the use of wealth with what you really care about. And what he does is there's an asterisk, is like meaningful financial planning is about the alignment of the use of wealth, and then maybe parentheses, time, talent, energy, money, relationships, assets with what you really care about. Like the dance of all those things. And that's where we are very good in our industry at distilling down the assets a person has from a balance sheet standpoint. Where I think the best advisors in the world and the ones that I get most excited about listening to and spending time with are those that have that other element to be able to, I mean, it's table stakes. You got to be good at everything, at all the other stuff. Mm-hmm. But that can then introduce that human component that says, hey, but what does like a rich life look like for you this year? Like if you finished this year and you said, it's awesome, what had to happen? Like what's a day in the life of you look like if things are really working? And I think it's a great question for anybody. I don't care what business you're in. I don't think we ask it enough, because I think what ends up happening is most of us do life by default rather than by design, because society, culture, well-meaning people have given us all a default way of being, a inherent future that we want. But do we really want that one? And I think that's a good time to just sit back and go, hey, what do I really like? And what do I think I want? It's okay to be wrong, you know, just because, I mean, gosh, I'm thankful that, you know, the 17-year-old version of me didn't get everything the 17-year-old version was hoping for,
right,
you know?
Right.
But I do think at least deciding in advance to say, my best guess and what I think a beautiful future looks like in all these areas I care about. We always use 5. It's 5 areas. You can subdivide these, but
right.
You got the
spiritually, mentally, physically.
Spiritual, professional, financial, physical, relational.
Yep.
All those kind of big areas that you just, if you're telling the story of your life and they're touching those areas.
See, Wes, I learned from.
That's right. That's right, man. You took something away.
I took something away. Yeah. There you go. After a decade, I got that one down.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, but it becomes because we're so busy doing and being, we often don't take time to think about what we're becoming, you know, and
you hit the nail on the head on that. I would say 90% or 95% of advisors don't understand that aspect of it. And if you lead with that, it makes your job a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
Because you're not guessing at, hey, I got to dance and I got to make sure I perform here.
Yeah.
But you're actually just coming back and saying, in any business though.
Yeah.
Right. If it's not a transactional business, I think there's a different conversation around transactional business. Yep. Like, hey, I'm buying a widget from you. And I think how our society is built upon is buying widgets. I mean, we're in a capitalist society. Sure. And there's nothing wrong with that. And Dr. Starr was on here a long time ago, and he goes, Brandon, you understand that like capitalism at the core is literally saying that, hey, I'm going to produce something for a value. I'm going to give it to you because it increases your value in life, right?
Yeah, and makes all the boats rise. Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly what it is. And so I think the way that we actually change that narrative into saying, not only do I help the boats ride and perform this transaction with you, but I think the way that you've helped me understand and grow my practice is being able to say, what do you want?
Yeah.
What's important to you?
That's right. That's right, because there are so many ways to make money. Everybody needs to make money.
Right. You
know, that's the fuel, right? You got to have it to sleep indoors and eat every day, and hopefully your goals are beyond that. But if that's the goal, life's not going to be very fun. And so it needs to be something different than that where you really talk about what's a great life look like, and then we can always back into how we're adding value to the economy to generate money. And there's a lot of ways to do that.
Yeah. Where we see, this is why when you hoodwink guys into coming into your office, because they're here on another deal and you're like, hey, we got a short amount of time to pack all this in, which I think in 25 minutes, Ryan, we packed in.
On the dot, that's insane.
Yeah.
You're like Rain Man.
We packed in that's because I just got through 3 days of counting cards in a place that we should not name, right? So I'm still recovering here. But if you're talking to, and if you have not listened to Wes's podcast, now it's geared for advisors. I will say that.
Yep.
Right. So what's your podcast?
From Busy to Rich.
From Busy to Rich.
Yeah.
Now, I think every single business owner can take away some of the core fundamentals of Wes's podcast and apply them to his business. And that, me and Wes talked about doing podcasts years ago, and I knew where he was going, right? And I knew I didn't want to go there. And this is what makes our practice different, right? And so pursuing alpha is the underlying thing of what Wes is trying to do for the advisory side. And so I think it's incredibly awesome. And so definitely check out his podcast if you ever have a chance. Even if you're a business owner and you're not a financial advisor or financial planner or in the industry, I think you will be able to take away from it. And you had a great CPA on a couple of weeks back. What was it, a couple of weeks or a month ago?
Oh yeah, well we've had some real interesting guests on there. We actually have some business owners that are they're just bringing their brand of how they do what they do, which is certainly applicable to the financial community. But that's why it's good for anybody that owns and is running a business to look at that. But we had the last one that aired last week, or maybe a week before last, we had Tim Kennedy, and he was a Special Forces Green Beret, also fought and won multiple world titles in mixed martial arts, and fought for it was one step away from finding the title in the UFC. Oh. So he's got an interesting background, and it was a lot of fun. So you want to pick
a fight with him?
Yeah, you want to make him mad. That's a great way to get beat up. But but he's got a fascinating story. But so we have quite the mix of people that are on it, which is why I bring that up, because people listen to us that are in no way, shape, and form in our business. We got most of our, because it is geared specifically towards people that are in the financial business, but we'd love to have you if you're not.
Yeah, so. It's good. I love it. And I think this, just, being around each other for almost a decade here, a little over a decade, has been a really cool thing. So what's a takeaway? So I try to add to somebody today. What's a takeaway? If you could add value to people today, do you have a takeaway that you could really give them? Yeah,
I want to tell a little story, if that's all right.
Sure.
There is most people, especially in where we're filming this today, have heard of this place, but maybe some of the other listeners may not have. There's a company out there called Chick-fil-A.
Oh, really? Never heard of that.
Yeah, never heard of them. Of course, there are still people in the world that haven't. So that's where we're spreading the Chick-fil-A gospel all over the world. But here's the funniest thing. So I got kind of a interesting. I heard the marketing, one of the early marketing directors for Chick-fil-A, do a talk at a meeting, and he had two really funny stories that I was just like, man, that's a different way of thinking about it. One was here's just some stats for you on this. So if you had to guess, of all the top 200 fast food successful franchises out there, what would you guess the average revenue for one store is on the average across 200?
I know this. I'm pretty sure, so I'm not going to spoil the wow factor for you. But I would say it's like 200,000.
No, more than that. So the average top 200 are 750,000. Is what? Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Actually, the top. Yeah. So no. Top 200 is 750,000 of the 200.
So explain what that's net profit or that's gross sales.
That's gross revenue.
Okay.
For that. Yeah. And then you move on. You move up to the top 5 of those, and the average revenue jumps to at McDonald's is an example of that. So average McDonald's franchise. Keep in mind, many of them stay open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Average revenue is $2.6 million for a McDonald's, which is pretty impressive, well above those top 200. And then you get to Chick-fil-A, and you got to remember Chick-fil-A is closed every Sunday, so closed an extra 52 days a year. Also going to be closed on holidays and things like that McDonald's is not going to close for. Average revenue in one of their stores is $7 million.
Jeez.
And if you think about it,
That's 5x.
it's amazing. It's amazing. And if you think about this for the business owners that are listening, and they all would say they're in the fast food business, right? They all would say that, yeah, we have a product, we have a drive-through, we have a dining room, we have a system that we move people through. All of them would say we do the same thing. So why is one of them producing $7 million and the other's producing 2.6? And I would say because we oftentimes have ways of describing something that sounds the same, but the experience is very different. And I think when we are in our businesses, there are games being played that people just aren't even aware of that are out there. And this is true across every single industry.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think backing into the other Truett Cathy story, he's the founder of Chick-fil-A that I love, was this marketing director goes on to tell this. And I think this is a big takeaway. This is like where I'll go with this is he said, we're all at this meeting. This is back in the day when Boston Chicken, what now later became Boston Market after it filed bankruptcy. But they were the biggest competition Chick-fil-A had. And they were grow. They were borrowing money. They're opening up stores all across the country. And he said, I remember all us young executives being in this room with Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A. He said, very uncharacteristic for Truett, he just starts pounding on the table like this until everybody stopped talking, because we were all talking about growth. How are we going to be Boston Market? How are we going to get bigger? How are we going to get bigger? How are we going to get bigger? Truett pounds on the table till everybody stops looking at him and he goes, I'm sick and tired of hearing about how we're going to get bigger. If we ask the question, how are we going to get better, our clients will demand we become bigger. And interestingly, today, Chick-fil-A, multi-billion-dollar organization, as you can see, Boston Market filed bankruptcy and became Boston Market out of that. But it is true. I mean, I think when we can focus first on how do we get better, people will demand we become bigger. I think what we are in, there's a big, hey, how do we grow? How do we grow? How do we grow? I think a better question is, how do we want to grow? Like,
how do you want to?
That's it. How do you want to grow? Because growth. Everybody, we can follow stories of people that grew a lot, like revenue wise, maybe even profit wise. You wouldn't want their life. And you wouldn't want the kind of negative impact in many cases they made. So backing into what does it look like to win for us? I mean, being so clear on an exciting vision. To one of the fundamentals in our organization is we always talk about, you got to have an exciting vision and a grateful condition. Exciting vision, grateful condition, because when you're wired the way you and I are wired, where is very much about what cool things can we do next? Like, what are we going to create? And very creative about how we're going to, like, here's a cool future we could move into, and backing into how do we do that. But oftentimes, and I believe that is like fundamental from the hand of God in us. I think faith is the substance of things we hope for, evidence of things not yet seen. So it's built in us to want to have a bigger version of a future that we're not yet living. And I think that's also fun and unique to people, that we can do that. And then the tricky part, this is the hardest part, because Chuck Swindoll used to say, you got to be careful not to burn out, but you also don't want to rust out. Right. And so the burnout side is where I think we naturally go for our wiring, which is so focused on getting there, we aren't even enjoying where we are. Like, because it's like, once I hit that, once I get to that, then. But you know what's going to happen is when you get there, there's another there.
Yeah.
And it never stops. Like, you celebrate it, right? You have the milestone. That's why.
But the milestone usually there's depression that comes with if you see the destination as the goal.
Yeah.
And it's not the path.
For sure. Yeah, the journey, right?
The journey, it's the course.
And with us, one of the best things I've ever done personally, and I feel it when we all drift, right? So is also taking the time to have a grateful condition. Right where I am, I'm away to where I'm going, meaning, like, we could sit here today and make a list, and every listener can make a list when you're driving down the road in your mind. In fact, just think about the one or two things here you have in your life right now what you once prayed for. Like, everybody's got that thing that, man, I worked so hard for it. God, if you would give it to me, or whatever your faith system is, if you're not there, you had stuff in your life that you wanted and that came to pass. Okay, so all those things. And so take some time to, like, regularly renew your mind to the things that are great in your life, the people that you once prayed for, right? The relationships that you have, the things that have been accomplished. And it doesn't mean it's not an absence of ambition to do that, because it is a requirement to travel the journey well. And so I would look at, if I'm one, how are you focused on making it better? What are we becoming in the process of what we're pursuing? And then remembering to keep that, like, you got big ideas, that's awesome, and you should have those. Most people that even would listen to a podcast like this, they're leaning in towards what the future is, right?
Yeah, they're already there. They want to grow in one way or another, internally or externally. They want to get better.
And so being real clear on what beautiful growth is, like what do you want to grow into, and then taking the time to enjoy this process of getting from where you are right now to where you're trying to go, because otherwise you're going to spend your whole life on this journey and you're not going to enjoy much of it. So having some time. I'm in Lubbock because I went to a funeral today, and of a guy who lived an incredible life. He's 87 years old, and his sons, who are adults and have kids and grandkids of their own, they're all it was a beautiful service, beautiful celebration of life to a guy who truly did this well. He had a big future, accomplished a lot of stuff, but the stories that would come up weren't about all that. I mean, it's important, and he did them, but they were about, man, who he was while he was doing what he does. And I think, if I had to define like success for myself long term, it goes back to what kind of man was he as he lived life? What kind of expression of love was he in the world while he was doing these things that were so helpful? And continuing to ask that question makes me see the world very differently than when I get so focused on, and I'm a results guy, so I want anybody to listen. I don't want you thinking like I'm not, because I am, but I really want to, whatever we're doing, I want to do it well. So I think, what are you becoming in the process of what you're pursuing is an incredibly important answer, or very important question to get an answer to.
I think you articulated that extremely well inside of there. The shotgun approach is probably the worst thing you can probably have.
Yeah.
And I've looked at that back, and I looked at my dad, and I lost my dad this year. And so tough year for me, my family, all the way even going back to last year. And so I look back at the legacy that he left, and I'm going, wow, man, that man accomplished a whole lot.
Yeah.
But I also saw him in such a struggle throughout life. And so I have to, and when you're, it's one of those things when you cultivate or you're around people that struggle at the time, what do?
Yeah.
You lean towards struggle, right? Because it becomes your normal. And so I have to always renew my mind to actually come back and say, hey, look, Dad did, some incredible things. But he did those things because he fought the right things that he needs to fight. And, he was a police officer and died in arrest in one of the largest lawsuit ever against a state agency in U.S. history. Found one of the biggest embezzling schemes ever in U.S. history. They were trying to make movies about him. I wish they would make that movie about him. But the underlying things that I got to see when I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old was the struggle that he had. And he went from that struggle to struggling in business, to struggling later on in life. And there was pockets of enjoy, but he never leaned into the enjoyment of life. And I think that's where you're getting to, that I always have to renew my mind. And I think people are innately gravitate towards that. And then there's people that, like, they win $1 million on a blackjack table. I just came back from Vegas, so I have to acknowledge.
There you go.
Right? They're going to give it back to Vegas. Just give them a amount of time, right? And then there's other people that, hey, I was fortunate to win this thing. I'm going to go do other things with it to make everybody else around me better. And those are the ones that I see that are actually happier in life inside of there. So I'm not saying Dad wasn't happy. That's not the takeaway here. I'm just saying that he cultivated towards struggle constantly. Yeah. And that made his life harder, when I think you can actually look at the pursuit of happiness a lot different than you can actually look at the end goal, because he was always goal oriented. Like, I want a goal, right? Yeah. And I want to achieve something, but it was always like, I got to struggle through this in order to achieve it. I don't think that's how life is made. Right. I think life is made to be like, hey, I can struggle through pockets at times because it's something hard, but just because it's hard doesn't mean you struggle.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. No, one of the things we do, try and do it once a quarter organizationally is we have everybody go through an activity matrix where we walk through and say, okay, all the things that I do day in, day out, two things. What kind of value is that adding to the organization? And we rank it 1, 5, 10. 10 being, this is probably one of my highest and best uses based on how our organization is built. 5 being, this is important, but it's probably not necessary I'd do it if we had someone to take this over. And then 1 is, we probably don't even need to do this anymore. Like we just evolved out of it, or it's just not relevant anymore, or we inherited it and we decided, why are we doing that? The other is like enjoyment. Same, 5 or 10, 5, 1. Hey, I wonderfully enjoy this. I'm fine. I can do it. I don't like it.
You're competent in it, but you're just not yet, right?
Yeah.
And
so
what's that off of? I just did that 6 months ago.
Oh, did you do the Working Genius?
Working Genius,
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's the fundamental of Working Genius, right?
Yeah. Being in your genius zone, but it's interesting because here's where it always goes. Because I have conversations with our team after they do them, and when I tell them to rank it, both competence and then enjoy, or effectiveness and enjoyment, I often have them say, like, and if it's a not a 5, or if it's a 5 or a 1, not a 10, why? Because here's the thing, and I think this is where it is. Like you mentioned, we all go through hard times or compressed times, and sometimes something's a 5 or even a 1 because it's new. I just don't have enough reps to carry the weight that long.
Sure.
But I know eventually I'll be strong enough, and I'll probably actually enjoy it.
Yeah,
and
enjoy
excel
it.
it.
Right.
As long as I'm clear about where I'm going. Yeah, and I think that's oftentimes we say it organizationally is the reason oftentimes we trade what we can have immediately for what we want ultimately is, 1, we forgot what we wanted ultimately or have never defined it in the first place.
That's the biggest one. Nobody ever defines it.
We don't define it. Yeah, we just run and we do things. And that's why it's easy to do hard things when you understand the ultimate reason behind it.
And there's a purpose.
And there's a purpose. Yeah, and listen, it's like even with clients, we'll say, okay, there's a kind of pocketed system we like to do where we say, all right, and it's like a T, and you put on there high profit, low profit, and then heavy work or light work, heavy work. So oftentimes,
do you think that's flawed though?
I think you have to interpret it well, because here's where I think it can go is
enjoyment. No enjoyment. There's a couple other
sure.
metrics you got to put in there.
You got to lay that over, because it can be high profit, light work, and it just has no meaning for you.
Correct. That's the point I'm trying to make. There's a lot of things that people don't. You got to have some type of enjoyment, or you become complacent and you're like, oh,
right. And it's not exciting, and it's So I think with that though, the knowing where you're going, like ultimately, or where you want to go ultimately, it also helps put a perimeter around your behavior as to which of those are you doing. And it's okay for a time. Like the thing people often shy away from is they're like, well, I'm going to try to go to all light work, high profit, which is fine. But there are things that you need to do sometimes to get where you want to go that will ultimately be light work, high profit, that to start, because you just don't have the reps with it yet, are heavy work and low profit, because you're just having to put in more time. You're having to lift those weights to get to a place where you're in condition of making it that way. So I think you have to, that's why it's so critical to be like regularly defining, okay, is this where I want to go? What do I need to do to get there? What kind of weights do I have to lift? What kind of diet do I have to go on? Whatever it might be. And then you can do it. And then ultimately either you flesh out that, hey, no, this has now become
something that's normal.
Normalize the new. That's
or
right.
Or you find somebody else that does it better than you.
That's
and
right.
And you leave them in there and oversee it. And
right.
that's where I think the huge value is. Hey, what are we doing at time? Wes, I can talk to you for the next 3 hours. I really want to, but I think you're fixing to be on a conference call in 4 minutes.
Yes, sir.
So I love the time what we spent together. Please tell me we get to do this again.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah,
absolutely. We'll have to have you on our side of the mic as well. It won't have as cool of equipment. Well, yours will, because you'll be doing it from here. Mine will be on Zoom on the other side of a computer
It's pretty
screen.
cool though, man. But I get to see you on the big screen behind us, right?
That's right.
So it'd be really engaging, and so I love it, man. But thank you so much for joining us today. And it's Wes Young. He's at Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And
WesYoungLive.com. WesYoungLive.com.
Yeah, man. He does do speaking engagements, and it is really worth listening to this guy speak live, because definitely check him out there. But Wes, thank you so much for taking the
Thanks,
time
brother.
today.
Always good to be with you.
See you soon.
All right. Bye.